Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Midwestern Marx live stream. We're doing another labor segment with labor organizer Kyle Pettis today. He's got the Teamsters drip on, folks. He's a real, legitimate union man now. So thanks for being with us today, Kyle.
Hell yeah, glad to be here.
For sure. All right, we're going to talk about potential upcoming strikes, what's going on with a lot of the biggest unions in the country and the labor movement today. We'll get into all of that after we play our intro. All right, here we go. We already got a super chat. Thank you to Dog Eater for the $2 super chat. Although theoretically, I do disagree that degrowth is needed because Americans consume too much. I would read Facing the Anthropocene by Ian Angus, which is a book that makes the pitch for ecosocialism, which is a different concept than degrowth, which kind of seems to be Malthusianism. You know, we need to focus on reducing carbon, but that translates to reducing humanity because humans emit carbon, or humans need carbon. So what we prefer is eco-socialism, changing the system of food production so that it's in harmony with the Earth's metabolic processes, which is what Ian Angus calls them, or looks at in this book, Facing the Anthropocene. I think there's a lot to learn from China's ecological civilization. I mean, they've moved a lot of their biggest cities close to carbon zero in a matter of years. When you control the mode of production, it's not that difficult. The problem with capitalism is that obviously private capitalists are in control of the economy and they're in competition with one another. And oil is such a quick burning and powerful resource. When you're in competition with other capitalists, you're not just going to give up the use of oil. So capitalism is an anarchic economic system that the vast majority of people have no control over. So that's where you lead to all these, that's what leads to all these runaway ecological crises. But the answer is socialism, not Malthusianism or degrowth, in my opinion. Although no more McDonald's for obese Americanos made me laugh.
That's fair.
That's fair, right?
Another thing I'd like to add to that, just quick thing, is that one of the biggest polluters in the world is the United States military. So there's another little tidbit right there.
They're like top. Like if you compare the U.S. military to like full countries, they're like in the top 50%.
Yeah,
they rank around like 100. They're like emit more than like 100 entire countries.
Exactly.
And then Americans are still like, look at what China's emitting. China needs to cut back. Like China is cutting back.
Yeah. Another personal thing about that. Before I was a Teamster truck driver, I was in the Seafarers International Union. I was a merchant mariner. I was on a Navy ship as a civilian contractor, right? The amount of pollution that one ship produced alone, I mean, that's like, we would go out into international waters to burn our trash so we wouldn't have to actually like dispose of it properly. We'd go out and like dump shit. Like, yeah, it's and that's just one tiny little ship I was on.
Right. My buddy's in the Guard, and he has a lot of stories like that of just like waste. Like, we got nothing to do today. Let's go shoot at the targets for like 2 hours. Just
right.
Then there's like an ammo shortage in the rest of the country. It's like, wait a second.
Right. But anyways.
Yeah. Anyways, we should get into probably the meat and potatoes of what we want to talk about. People are already asking any
Yeah.
thoughts about Sean Fain, UAW president. That might be a good jumping off point. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's what we're here to talk about. So Sean Fain, he's heading up the UAW. He's the recently elected president. Just to reiterate, he ran on a anti-corruption sort of ballot ticket, sort of deal. And he also spoke a lot in his campaign about we want to take the fight to the companies. We don't want to settle for pro-business contracts anymore. We want to like actually fight for the workers in the unions. All right. So he won that election. He's up there now, and he's in Detroit right now negotiating with the big three automotive companies. That would be Ford, GM, and Stellantis. And Stellantis owns, I believe, Chrysler, if I remember correctly. So these three, they do what's called pattern bargaining. So they consider that all three of their conditions are pretty much the same as far as the UAW is concerned, the workers. So they negotiate as a group with the UAW. So if one company accepts the contract, it's an exception for all three of the companies. And if one company refuses to sign, then it's a refusal from all three of the companies. So a little bit unique situation, but all combined, this is roughly 150,000 UAW workers across the country, and it's a very big deal. It's one of the biggest national contracts there is.
Yeah, it's crazy. How does it compare to like a year or two ago now? Like John Deere went on strike. I don't know if you were an expert in that, but is this
It's definitely
um,
bigger than John Deere. This is actually bigger than UPS. UPS is only 120,000 workers. That would be the most recent, big negotiation that happened a couple months, a little over a month ago, I think.
right? So in comparison, it's giant, and I see it as part of a larger wave of I don't know what you would call it, class consciousness, or just the labor movement sort of reawakening in
Yeah,
America
yeah.
after
It's
40 years of neoliberalism.
people were talking about it's like hot boy summer or whatever. It's really it's red hot labor summer. That's what it's been, and
Hot labor summer.
we're gonna get the big one right here at the tail end of summer. So it's pretty awesome. They save the best for last. Not to discount, obviously, but the um, the other thing with this is that it's 150,000 UAW employee members that are represented, but for there's a economic formula for every single assembly line job. There is 8 other jobs that are directly tied to that assembly work. So what you're actually, if this, for example, my job, all I do is move goods for General Motors as a Teamster truck driver for a separate company. So if my plant goes on strike and this nationwide strike happens, I will be out of work as well. I'm not even part of the strike, right? So how does that work? So there's a bunch of other factories as well. One of the factories I deliver to is in Petersburg, Indiana, and over there, all they do is work for General Motors and Ford. So if General Motors and Ford are shut down, they're out of work with that right then too. So using that formula, we can actually say this is going to directly impact about 1 million workers in the United States as far as who's going to be able to work and not work.
Right. That's crazy. And that's why, too, we make the distinction between productive and unproductive labor and the importance of organizing productive labor. It's not to talk down on anybody or say that organizing, certain sectors of the working class is a bad thing. But if you have, these blue collar industries organized, it can shut down the entire economy. Like their labor has so much power because not just the economy, but society can shut down, if they're able to withhold their labor in mass. So super important for Marxists to be paying attention to what's going on in these industries and showing solidarity with the striking workers. It's also one of those things where, like, if you go and stand on the picket line and you talk to people, you realize that a lot of them don't have the same political views as you. A lot of them don't have the same social views as you, but they're out there advocating on the side of labor. And you can build solidarity with people based around that fact, organizing based on class. So
Oh yeah,
I recommend people get
absolutely.
involved once those strikes kick off.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't stress that enough. I mean, for as far as the blue collar workforce and its unique this is the proletariat that like Marx was talking about. This is the proletariat that's capable, because it's revolutionary in the sense that it holds the unique position in society where it is the only class that can, without the other classes, reproduce the society that we live in. That's why the proletariat doesn't need the bourgeoisie. That's the foundation of the theory. Um, the proletariat itself reproduces through its labor everything that society has. So it's in a unique position to effect actual change if it becomes politically awakened.
And how do you think? I mean, you're obviously heavily involved in your area with labor and socialist organizing in general, but like, say a bunch of massive strikes kick off in the coming month, like we think that they might. What do you recommend that communists and socialists do to try and support these workers and take advantage of this moment?
Well, of course, I mean, we can always take to the social media and stuff like that and try and raise awareness to people about what's going on. But what I feel like is most important is trying to actually go to these pickets. I mean, chances are, I mean, there's some areas where there isn't obviously these factories, but these factories are all over the United States. You probably live close to one. I would say go out and support the strikers. Bring them a case of water. Go out and just have conversations with them. Um, you're going to get firsthand experience of like what the blue collar working class is all about. And if you do it, and if you're going to go out and have conversations with these people, definitely don't come from the position of trying to browbeat them into being Marxists or whatever and like trying to correct them and their thoughts. Go out there and have genuine conversations with these people and just see where they're at. And if you can have a like when we're on the picket line, like it's basically like a party. We're like socializing outside. We're cheering on, blocking the work so that the capitalists don't make any money. But we're having a good time. Like we're sitting back, having conversations, talking about politics, all that stuff. So I mean, these conversations are already happening. It's just there's no Marxists there to be part of that conversation. And always treat people like equals. I mean, these working class people, you're no better than these working class people at all. And that's number one thing I hate whenever I've seen leftists like go to the picket lines in the past and like talk down to people. It's like that's the most counterproductive thing you could possibly do.
Yeah, but like if these UAW workers don't have over 10,000 followers on Twitter, what the hell are they even doing? I don't even understand why we should support them.
Right, yeah.
They don't have nearly enough clout, right? They might
They
have
have
voted
bad
for
takes
Trump.
too. It's
Right.
terrible. Yeah.
Right. They have bad takes. They're worthy of being canceled. No, just kidding.
Right,
That was
yeah.
something. I mean, and I've always advocated for organizing based on class, but like the John Deere strikes revealed that. I would go stand on the picket line with these people. They'd be like, "Yeah, I voted for Trump." Like, and the caricature that you get online and on Twitter is that everyone who voted for Trump is like a hardcore, like, they bleed Trump, and there are people like that, but most of the guys were like, "Well, yeah, I thought he was better than Clinton." After
It's like
Bill
saying,
Clinton signed NAFTA
yeah,
and outsourced a
exactly.
bunch of
Yeah.
jobs, so I thought Trump might bring them back.
Hmm.
Like, okay,
Yeah, I mean that's
clearly
really
you're not a fascist.
right. Well, I mean that's the reality of the matter is like what pushed Trump over the line to win was union blue collar workers. That because they switched from being Democrats because they were tired of shit like NAFTA and the complete destruction of like their way of life, not in a social sense, but in a material economic sense. Um, we had what I think it was over 50 factories close because of NAFTA. I mean, it destroyed the blue collar working class. That's why we have the Rust Belt now. That used to be industrialized. Now it's not, and that was direct. The death knell for that was NAFTA, and they blame the Democrats for that, and rightfully so. And then they see stuff like what Joe Biden did with the railroad workers. They're not coming back, um, and quite frankly, they shouldn't. It's the reality of the situation.
True.
So, if you're going to go out there, you're absolutely going to talk to Trump people. That's just the reality. These are Trump people. But they get class. They understand class struggle far more than most leftists do because they're experiencing it. They're living it. That's their life. Um, just show respect and have conversations about things that you think that they could agree to. Don't go out and try to cancel them.
Right, unless they're not wearing a mask, then
Yeah, right. Yeah.
just freaking rip into them. Tell them to get off this picket line.
I
They're
guarantee you,
actually
none of them are
scary.
wearing a mask.
I'm just kidding.
Right.
Thank you so much, Hector Director. Nice name for the 5 pound super chat. Is that pounds? I've read capital, so I know what that is. Not the flex, but capitalism is inherently very weak. It needs the police, the army, politicians, the press, the legal system, and crooked union leaders. Absolutely. That's what Lenin talks about in his book State and Revolution. Says that under any class society, the state will be an organ of the ruling class that they use to suppress the working masses and keep them in their place. And under capitalism, the state is no different. I mean, we've seen different forms of that. The state has always been a tool of lobbyists and corporate donors, but a passing of a law like Citizens United through the Supreme Court in 2011 or 2010 or whatever it was really shows that to be the case, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Where they basically said corporate money, corporate political spending is protected by freedom of speech, which is completely absurd considering, journalists like Julian Assange are being jailed for releasing true things that the government did. So obviously we don't actually have freedom of speech, but I mean, that just shows the incredible level that our government has been co-opted by the economic ruling class. But I think, and union bureaucrats can definitely be, opportunists and side with the bourgeoisie against their own unions. And that's a huge problem in America. And it's become a huge problem after 40 years of neoliberalism. But the way I understand it, Sean Fain and the rank and file of the UAW are really fighting back against that. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean that's what I was gonna say. Is that's how Sean Fain got in? Is he said we're done with the crooked shit. We're gonna get. I mean, I want to run and I want to fight all the corruption. And I mean, it's not just words. Even the local at the plant that I work at, they kicked out half the leadership that they found to be crooked and doing underhanded shit. And they're backing that up. It's happened all across the country. There's been like a purge of the UAW leadership that they've found to be corrupt. And Sean's been the spearhead of this, and it's been widely supported by the membership. And another thing to say about what Lenin said regarding unions specifically is in left-wing communism and infantile disorder, he specifically talks about no matter how reactionary the union is, we have to be involved with it because it's an organic formation of the working class fighting for their economic interests. If you that is people, union workers, whether you like it or not, are some of the most advanced elements of the class because they understand class struggle inherently. They've accepted trade union consciousness. They're collectively bargaining for their rights on the job, for their position as a class. And if you're not involved in that, then what politics are being discussed? It's not Marxism if no Marxists are there. So how do you reach the workers otherwise?
That's one of the first parts or the best parts of the CPUSA manual from 1935 when they were really successful. That's one of the things I like to bring up. Is one of the things that they hammer home is having connections with the unions, having communists in the unions or having communists who have good relationships with the unions. Because like you said, there are so many people, especially a union, and they get the benefits of a union, but they don't even know what it does. They don't know how the union works. They might be annoyed that they have to pay union dues every month. They're not heavily involved. So the people who are heavily involved and the people who do understand the collective bargaining process and are involved in the union, like you said, that's the most advanced form of the working class, or that's a super advanced form of the working class because they're engaging in class struggle. They recognize that class solidarity against capital and against the bosses is in their interest. So, they're just one step away from communism or socialism. And what Lenin talks about a lot, because it was more of a problem back then than it is now. A lot of the communists have been purged from the unions in the United States, and the labor movement has been destroyed. But there were a lot of people or working class people with trade union consciousness in the Soviet Union who liked the unions and what the union did for them. But, we're anti-communist, we're anti-socialist, we're anti the seizure of political power. So that's the trade union opportunism you have to look out for. But that's all the more reason for communists to be involved with the unions, connected to the union, so they can fight against that opportunism. And today in America, it's almost a different situation. Like, the unions have just been like uprooted and smashed and corrupted.
They've been neutered since the 80s is really what it comes down to. I mean, Ronnie Reagan did a lot, just implementing certain obscure laws. I mean, he was pulling labor laws that hadn't been necessarily gotten rid of, that were under contention from like the 1880s, to crush some of these unions. I mean, it was insane. And ever since then, the unions really haven't recovered. And there was a lot of corruption even back then. And the corruption really started in the 50s, really small, but blossomed out from during the 50s because of the purge of the communists during the McCarthy era. I mean, it became a law that you couldn't be a union organizer and be a member of the Communist Party in the 1950s. And that's also why you saw between the 1930s and up to the 50s, some of the most radical strikes in the country, some of the most radical union actions. If anybody's really interested in that history, look up the rise of the CIO, the Conference of Industrial Organizers, which is part of the AFL-CIO today. But they actually split out of the AFL and were mainly led by communists, and these unions were formed by communists because they felt like the AFL was going backwards instead of forwards. And you had things like the Little Steel strike, which was one of the most militant strikes in U.S. history. And you had like the organization of the UAW was by the CIO. So there's a lot of interesting history there. But not to dwell too much in the past, we gotta look to the future as well. So to get into that, I saw Eddie was pulling up a clip that I made here. So Sean Fain, if you caught my last one with Noah, like I said, a little bit in the intro, we're in the middle of the UAW negotiations. So Stellantis is one of those big companies, and it's actually the biggest. It's got $12.1 billion, and that's billion with a B, net profits in the first 6 months of this year. It 4 times the net profits what GM made in the first 6 months of this year. It's massive. It's killing the industry as far as making money. And so they gave a counter proposal to the UAW, and I don't know if I gotta highlight some of the big asks from the UAW. I can go over that real quick if you didn't catch the last live stream. So some of the big stuff is first off, economic demands are $10 an hour minimum raise right off the bat. That's massive. I mean, these guys, starting guy on an assembly line at UAW is making about $17 an hour. They say that needs to be at least increased by $10 an hour, at least. That's huge. They want to end the tier system. So the tier system is basically workers doing the same job, but they're getting paid different rates based on a number of factors that are up to the company's discretion. They want to do away with that. They want everybody to make the same amount who's doing the same type of work. And the reason for this that Sean gives, which is truly like a good message, is that he says it divides the workers. It divides everybody up and pits worker against worker. And we're fundamentally against that. Another thing was they want to expand the retiree benefits. So they want to help guys who are trying to retire. They want to expand the pension. They want to make sure that retirees retain their medical benefits, because if you retire from GM, you don't get to keep any of your medical benefits that you have. There's a lot in that, but one of the biggest things for me personally is that they want the right to a nationwide strike anytime any of these 3 companies want to close a factory down. So if there's a factory out in the middle of Iowa, okay, and it only employs, even if it's just like 100 workers or something, and GM wants to go ahead and say, no, we're gonna pack that factory up and ship it to Mexico like we did all throughout the NAFTA era. The UAW wants the ability to say, no, if you do that, we're all going to go on strike nationwide. We'll shut your entire factory down. We'll make it unprofitable for you to do so, and intimidate you into not doing it. And I think that's truly revolutionary. I mean, he's doing what Trump and all these politicians said they were going to do, but never did, which is he's trying to secure manufacturing jobs in the country with that. It's massive. Yeah, I mean, Taft-Hartley, I mean, you could kind of make the argument this is kind of bordering Taft-Hartley sort of territory as well, in a way. I mean, he's working around it, which I think is really clever, because it'll take the politicians to repeal Taft-Hartley, of course.
For sure. Do you want to explain real quick? I mean, someone said earlier there's a super chat we didn't acknowledge. If anyone wants to learn more about Citizens United and the government being captured by corporations, watch Citizen Coke. Yeah, it kind of explains how corporations co-opt the government. I mean, Taft-Hartley's even pre Reagan, pre the era that we think of as neoliberalism, but that's really when the union movement and labor movement started to be crushed. You want to just quick touch on?
Yeah, Taft-Hartley, in a nutshell, basically, they can't strike about anything. It puts a lot of limitations on strike activity and other forms of direct action activity, and it forbids explicitly the rights of the unions to institute a generalized strike, as in like all workers nationwide, and also it does not allow the union any union to strike on things that are social issues that belong to the political realm. They're not allowed to do that. That's straight up illegal. So
exactly. So that, I mean, these industrial or blue collar workers or productive laborers that we're talking about that have so much power, because they're at the center of the economy, Taft-Hartley really limits them and says they're not allowed to make political demands because they know how much power the productive working class has. I mean, it's the same exact reason Biden broke the rail strike. He knows that those workers, when they're in solidarity and acting, in solidarity with one another, they have the power to demand whatever they want because they can shut the whole economy down. There's nothing Biden, the Democrats, and the corporations can do about it if they have enough solidarity. So that's why this stuff is so exciting. And you want to talk about the counter proposal that
so Stellantis went on the news, made a statement for the news, I should say, and was talking about how they're not seeking any concessions from the union, which was a bold-faced lie because they immediately the next day turned around and gave this dog shit proposal to Sean Fain, and it was just such a slap in the face. Sean Fain says that Stellantis has decided to spit in our face. That's what he said about this contract. He was livid. I've never seen him curse as much as he did in this stream. And yeah, so if you want to play the clip, this is his filing system when it comes to dog shit contract proposals.
They're looking for concessions. Everything they're looking for in this document is about concessions. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do with their proposal. I'm going to file it in its proper place because that's where it belongs, the trash, because that's what it is. They're looking for concessions. Everything.
Yeah, let's watch it again.
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do with their proposal. I'm going to file it in its proper place. That's where it belongs, the trash, because that's what it is.
That's where it belongs.
The trash.
It's like the Lonely Island song, "Happy Birthday to the Ground."
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, he wasn't having it. So yeah, it was awesome. That actually got clipped. And got put on like MSNBC. They were talking about this. Jim Cramer, if anybody knows that guy on MSNBC, he red baited him right on MSNBC Live about a week ago. He said something similar again yesterday, but he drew it back a little bit. But when that first happened, he red baited him right there on MSNBC. Said he sounded like a communist, and then equated him to Earl Browder.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Yeah, which I mean we love, but obviously that's a negative message to the majority of people watching MSNBC. So they're already trying to escalate this and make the UAW to be sounding like they're ridiculous. And another note, with Stellantis, like I said, most profitable right now. Their COO, who is supposed to be in the negotiations, he's fucked off. He's on vacation at one of his multi-million-dollar estates down in Mexico. And
dude, they can't help themselves.
Yeah, I mean, and he's refused to even come to the negotiating table. But he had the time to write a letter to his employees at Stellantis, slamming the union, saying that they need to what was the term? They need to get realistic about the economy. These are the scumbags that are telling UAW people who are working $17 an hour on the factory floor, putting in 70-hour weeks at sometimes, that they don't deserve a life. It's just so fucked. And here's the other thing. I don't know if anybody knows. I forget what the exact term is. I think it's called critical status. That's it. So critical status. If you're at one of these big three, like General Motors, Ford, Stellantis, if you're working on their assembly line and the plant that you're working at goes into critical status, that means for 90 days straight, no days off, no weekends, no Sundays, nothing. 90 days straight, you're working in that plant 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. And they put these. There's several dozen plants right now that are at critical production, critical status. You know, you've got thousands of workers across this country working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, getting worked to death. And if they got to call out for something and it's not, you know, kosher under the contract, whatever, they get shit canned. They get a write up, you know, and then the union's got to go to bat for them, try and get them out of it. I mean, it's disgusting.
They can't get 1 day off, and their CEO's taking, or whatever, one of their shareholders is taking these giant profits.
Yeah, it's their version of a CEO. Yeah, like, he's on a vacation.
All that money he spends on his luxurious vacation could go towards wages. You know, that has to be figured into the price of their commodities. The giant payouts these vultures, these parasites are getting, but like, they're so disconnected from the working class. They're so disconnected from the people they view as the peasants. They, like I said, they can't even help themselves, dude. They can't even say, okay, my workers are on strike. They're mad at me. Like, clearly now is not the time to go on this extremely expensive vacation, because that'll look really bad. They're too out of touch. They're too selfish. They're too used to making gobs and gobs and gobs of money off the backbreaking labor of their workers. And it just shows like they'll never hand you concessions the way that social democrats want them to. They're never going to, you know, agree to be taxed more and pay for our health care. They're going to shove us down and cut costs on production and overwork us and exploit us as much as they possibly can until we get organized and fight back.
And that's exactly what's wrong. That's what's wrong with the social democrats, is that they assume there's any amount of like decency and humanity left in these people. There's not. They don't care.
Right.
Like, they really don't. They have no hangups about the lifestyle they lead and the what they do to people on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Here's the clip of Jim Cramer on MSNBC red baiting Sean Fain. I guess Jordan Sheridan of Status Quo reported on it.
Yeah, I saw this.
Shout out to him for that.
It's muted. Yeah.
And the incredible Facebook performance by Sean Fain yesterday, where he just called the Stellantis offer trash. We're going to have, right when we start talking about the presidential election, I think the biggest strike our country has had in years, which is the UAW.
You think that's going to happen?
Yeah.
You don't think Gene Sperling can talk both sides off of ledges?
No, Gino can't do it, because this guy who runs the UAW reminds me of Earl Browder. I mean, he's like a longshoreman union. The stevedores.
Well, today's the 100th day of the writers on strike.
Right.
And that rhetoric isn't cooling down after Friday's apparently failed meeting.
No, I mean, our issues matter tremendously. The auto strike is going to, I have Dana on tonight.
When?
Not Zool. I have Zool
September
on tomorrow.
14th is the
tonight.
Look at them stock prices drop, buddy.
Look how distraught he is. The strike is still going. No,
the workers are standing up for themselves. Our stocks are going down. We're fucked.
What the hell?
He's running it. He's just going around telling
a panic attack.
But if you walked in there, he would tell you. I mean, he says horrible things. He's talking about a kleptocracy, that the people who own these stocks are just bad people.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Jim. Yeah, they're bad people. What do you want?
Workers are doing 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and they can't afford health care, and the shareholders are making all the money off their labor and going on multi-million-dollar vacations. Yeah, it's fair enough to call them bad people. I mean, we're Marxists. We make a material analysis, right? So the labor value created by these workers is being taken by the shareholders, which leads to exploitation, alienation, and overwork for the workers, while the exploiters are on $1 million vacations that they did no labor for. So we're against it from a material perspective. But if you want to be moral about it, fuck these people. Like,
well,
they're
assholes.
assholes.
I'll tell you another thing. Like, the only thing they've done with their profits, really, for the last 4 quarters, they've not invested it into updating their assembly lines, trying to make it more productive, because they don't care about production. They haven't tried to invest it, obviously, in the workers. Obviously, they haven't done anything. What they've done is they've instituted stock buyback programs and cut huge dividends to their shareholders. That's all they've done. And they've increased the CEO salary and the CEO salaries and all of this shit. They don't give a shit about being productive. They don't care about actually producing a good. They care about profitability. Okay? And more than that, they care about profitability for their own pocket. That's all they care about.
Exactly. I mean, which shows how even if capitalism is a fetter on production in general. And the advance of technology and the advance of, how much we can produce. Because rather than investing all that money in production or investing it in their workers, they're taking it. They're taking it and they're hoarding it and they're using it to go on giant vacations. And they're expecting that every year their profits are going to go up and up and up and up. So they'll, find new ways to suck profit out of us or find new ways to overexploit their workers until the whole system comes crashing down the same way it does every 10 or 12 years. So
they have 12. Stellantis has $12.1 billion in net profit. That's after all their expenses. That's just pure cash in their pocket. Well, and all they do with it is stock buybacks and all that crap. They don't care. But what are they like? Imagine what they could have done to increase production for that. Like, if we want to talk about it from an economic perspective, if capitalism's so efficient and all this shit, and we want to produce things, right? They could have started 12.1 billion. They could have invested into a new factory. They could have created some more jobs. They don't give a shit about any of that. What they give a shit about is putting money in their pocket. That's it. They don't care. It's about profitability.
Yep.
It's disgusting to see.
Surplus.
Exactly.
Let's finish this video here.
Kids own these. I mean, it's like it's a 9-year-old 401k.
Yeah, I haven't been focused.
Oh, you've got to focus on this guy.
All right.
This guy is he was made for our show.
We should bring him on.
Oh,
you got to focus on this guy. It's like, I always picture these guys because, the class struggle is two-sided. Like, we obviously side with the working class, but there are, the capitalists are in a struggle against us. And you have people like the Koch brothers who have spent millions and millions and millions of dollars on political spending and, controlling the education system and making it more neoliberal, more pro-capitalist. Like, I consider them warriors in the class struggle for the other side. That's what these propagandists are. They're like, focus on this guy. Look what's going on with all these discontented workers. We need to shut this down. We need to nip it in the bud now. Look at our stocks.
And listen to what he wants to say. He's saying he wants to bring him on to the show, but he says he wants him as a third rail. He wants him there so he can browbeat him and tell him how stupid he is and talk down to him. That's what he really wants to do. He wants to bring him on his show and like Vosh style, I owned him, with like all this bullshit that nobody fucking cares about. Like these fake facts. Okay. He wants to talk about the economy getting hurt. The stock market's not the economy, buddy. You got no idea what the real economy is because you're stuck on Wall Street. You have no idea. The real economy is putting money in working class people's pockets. That's the real economy.
This is why I say Marxism is economics and neoliberal, neoclassical economics is just price astrology. Because they just look at the stock market that basically measures their surplus value, and they're like, surplus value high, that is good. Surplus value low, that is bad. They're not saying how much of this money is being invested in expanding the amount of fixed capital. Right, which is what Kyle and I were just saying. A lot of this could be invested productively to create new jobs. How much of the social surplus is being invested in expanding the amount of fixed capital, expanding production? How much is being invested in the workers and their wages? Right, they don't even talk about wages. They just call it labor costs. And the lower the labor costs for them, the better. So the entire form of economics that these guys use to analyze the economy is bourgeois. It's, how do we maximize our surplus value?
Oh, I want him watch Sean Fain. I think he should be like a co-host. He is so electric. He is third rail. He is using rhetoric that Elizabeth Warren would say, keep your mouth shut. Really?
He's so mean to these generous, courageous, kind corporate CEOs.
That's pretty good.
And yeah, I mean, he is right.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Warren probably would tell Sean Fain to shut up because he's speaking too much truth, honestly.
True. Like,
Yeah.
listen, let's just pass Glass-Steagall. Let's make it so they can't. Or what was her? Was it Glass-Steagall, or she had the Consumer Protection Act, where it was like
Some
if
crazy
banks
stuff.
like just blatantly defraud you, you get some of the money back, and like Trump was trying to get rid of it.
Right.
But yeah, I think Sean Fain's rhetoric is a lot more important than Elizabeth Warren. More importantly, he has the backing of the rank and file working class, right? That he's the mouthpiece.
It's where he comes from.
Right. And I asked Kyle about this. I'm like, so how does the rank and file feel about this, sort of almost revolution within UAW? And you told me that they're the ones who created it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is their revolution. Sean Fain's just their figurehead. I mean, that's what it comes down to. He's the one advancing the struggle on their behalf. They put him there. They put him there for a reason, because they were tired of all the corruption and all the crap going on in their union, and they took it back. And I love it. I mean, unions are inherently more democratic. You can actually overthrow the ruling elite, or whatever you want to call it. They can actually affect actual change in leadership, and it actually translate to a change in direction of the union, as opposed to bourgeois democracy.
Right. That's badass. And that's why I feel like these labor segments are super important. And I have another buddy who's on the rail union who I'd like to bring on and introduce you guys to each other too.
Oh, awesome.
He's always saying, like, one of the major problems is that the working class doesn't even think of themselves as a class. Like I was saying at the beginning of the stream, they know that they have a union. They know what it is, but they don't know how it works, and they don't know how to get involved in it. And like, one of the main things that we need to advance class struggle in this country is union education. Teach people how the unions work, teach people what the unions have done, and teach people how to get involved in them, so that they can utilize them as a tool to fight back against capital, because that's ultimately what they are.
One of the great American novelists, John Steinbeck, I love this quote. I use it all the time. The American worker doesn't view himself as working class. He views himself as a temporarily impoverished millionaire.
Yep. That's fact.
That's it. That's how it's. I've never heard it more like concretely put. Like, that is like, and that's from the 30s. That's from the Dust Bowl era, and it's like, that is just American, like, the American dream nonsense to a T. It's like, right. I don't know. The world can't support that many millionaires. I don't know.
That's what, right. That's what I think of, especially not a capitalist system.
Right.
I mean, socialism can raise everybody's wealth together, but capitalism, to become a billionaire, you got to step on about 50 other people and make sure that they don't become billionaires, because you're stealing their labor value.
Exactly.
But that's when Lenin talks about petty bourgeois consciousness, like, obviously it was a different thing in Russia because they were semi-feudal. They didn't have this thing in America where there used to be a huge middle class, and everybody sees, the American dream has been sold to them. Like, you can pull yourself up by your bootstraps, start your own business. But that's how I think of, like, petty bourgeois consciousness in this country. Like, everybody, it's hard for people to have class solidarity because I think I won't be in this class for long. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. And now there's been all this criticism of the American dream, even in mainstream media and mainstream culture recently. I think people are starting to realize, like, that's kind of dead. The American middle class is kind of dead. Everybody's been reproletarianized, as Noah said. And, we need to have solidarity and struggle together to create a new and better system if we're going to achieve this American dream of material prosperity. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, one more. Yeah, well, and China recognized too. Like, when Lenin talks about petty bourgeois consciousness being a problem, when they go ahead with the NEP, the new economic policy, where they allow a little bit more private markets and a little bit more consumerism, and when Deng Xiaoping in China goes ahead with the market reform and opening up, he says, there's going to be more petty bourgeois consciousness. There's going to be more people wanting to climb the economic ladder and engaging in consumerism, and it's not necessarily a bad thing for China because they're trying to advance their productive forces. It's just something that needs to be combated. So in America, it's the same thing. Like, we need to tell people pitch to people that socialism can allow us to become prosperous together without stepping on our neighbors, and that's what our society needs, what our country needs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry,
Absolutely.
rant, but
No, you're good. So that was about 2 weeks ago when all that went down. So I guess like what's the new cutting edge info coming out? So 2 days ago, Sean Fain took to another live stream and he once again he said, "Look, our deadline has been firm. It is September 14th. That is when the contract is expires, the one that they're currently working under, and we need to have a new one by then. But guess what? We in the negotiations, the Stellantis COO is still vacationing down in Mexico. He hadn't even come yet, and we've been negotiating without him, and we've made no headway because he's not there. We've not really. We've made the most progress I think they've made is with GM, and even then, GM hasn't even agreed. They haven't even gotten to the financial demands, and saying that's the most. I mean, they still haven't gotten anywhere really. And Ford, they're still stonewalled as well. And he said, guess what, membership? Now is the time that he said they're not going to take us seriously unless we make them take us seriously. So I am now authorizing a strike authorization vote nationwide. So we right now underway. UAW members are organizing themselves to take a strike authorization vote at every factory nationwide that belongs to the big three. Now, what does that mean? So, for a strike authorization vote, what happens is the members in that local, they vote whether they want to go on strike or not, or I should not say the local, but in that specific factory. And if the vote passes, then they have now authorized the union leadership to call a strike at any point. So they can once they have that nationwide, and the deadline for them to finish voting is the 24th of this month. So between now and the 24th, they're going to vote. By the 24th, all the votes are going to be counted. They're going to declare they're going to have the votes. So when they declare that they've got the votes for a strike authorization, that means at any point, Sean Fain can walk into that negotiating room and say, guess what? We don't like what the fuck you just gave us again. We're going on strike. Deal with it. I think they only have to give a 48-hour notice from when they declare a strike to when it goes into effect. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's 48
would that be
hours.
considered a wildcat strike or not?
Wildcat
Not?
is technically not a
When they just-
super. Yeah, they don't announce it. That's kind of
Right,
an illegal strike.
but it's a
Yeah.
similar type of thing where it's just like short notice, like
Oh yeah.
that's what we want or we're out.
But he's been pretty clear. I mean, I think realistically, because he's got to act in good faith, show that he's negotiating all that shit. But really, they're not getting anywhere, and he knows this even now. But I think realistically, you can see a strike. He has the ability to strike anywhere between the 24th and the 14th, but you're going to see it on the 14th. He may do it a couple days early, whatever, to prove a point, but you will see it by the 14th because they're nowhere near. This is like the stage that they're at in negotiations, from what I understand from the inside, is what you would expect to be at before you even got to the table. And they've been at the table for 17 days, and they've gotten nowhere.
So it's sounding like they're almost for sure going to have a strike. And I want every single Midwestern Marx follower to get out on those picket lines, show solidarity with these people. I mean, this is going to be extremely important, more important than any sort of, garbage that the online left is wrapped up in right now, arguing about culture war stuff. This is a real form of class struggle. And, we're all about it. Like, it's good to take advantage of this, go to the picket lines, just show solidarity with people and show solidarity in their struggle. But like something I was talking about too, because there was recently some workers walked out at a local business here in my town, and I obviously went down to the picket line and hung out with them and showed solidarity with them. But I noticed that people from the Democratic Party were also popping in, and obviously we don't like the Democratic Party, but from a strategic standpoint, that was incredibly smart. Workers organize against their boss. Workers have a grievance with their boss, and they're making a protest about it. And you as a political party show up to support them. That's how you win the support of the community. So, if the communists are always opposing ourselves to labor and talking down to workers and not showing solidarity with them because some of them voted for Trump or whatever, that's what they're going to see us as, a bunch of terminally online leftists who aren't worth organizing with. But if you go to these strikes and you show solidarity with these workers, and if they ask you, you say, yeah, I'm a communist or whatever, I'm a socialist, I'm with this party. That's how you win goodwill, you know, and you don't have to go there and shove it down people's throats. Just show solidarity with the strikers and, you know, hold a picket sign or whatever. But the communists should go to wherever the workers are, organizing, wherever the workers are interested. The communists should be there to meet them. And doesn't mean you can't disagree with anyone who's a worker, right? Or have discussions with them. But yeah, this is a great opportunity to show solidarity with our class.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think, Eddie, I think we had a talk. I think you might be coming out to my picket line.
Planning on it.
Yeah, that's the idea. So, looking forward to that. I'm sure there'll be some streams, you know, maybe interviewing some UAW folks, trying to broadcast what they're really thinking out here on the strike line, see what they think about Sean Fain's proposals. Like, I don't know, I got big plans. I want to make those bridges.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a great opportunity. Build bridges between communists and the organized working class.
Hell yeah, that's the idea.
Today there was the Babylon Bee's managing editor saw that we're going to be interviewing Oliver Anthony, the music artist. He's like, well, you know, he had a good analysis, actually a class analysis. Like, for years, you know, there's been this middle class and upward mobility for the proletariat, which has made it so hard for Marxism to take root in America. But now it seems like that is changing. Like, Marxism is actually taking root in America. So yeah, let's continue to build that, continue to build those links between the Marxists and the organized working class, and continue to let it take root and to scare the shit out of the grifters and right-wing pundits. And the leftist pundits.
I'm inviting anybody who is like a principled Marxist who's out here. You know, I'm inviting anybody to come on out. I'll make every introduction possible, because that's what needs to happen. 100%.
For sure. Only if you're a rad lib who calls yourself a Marxist, there's actually not going to be a strike. Just stay home.
Yeah, no, it's not happening. Yeah.
We lied about the whole thing, so
yeah, it's fake. We're Satanists or whatever. Like whether that guy on the Babylon Bee say that we're satanic or some shit.
Yeah. He said he's like, they're satanic parasites trying to leech off the working class movement. Any movement needs to be Christian.
That's crazy.
What are you talking about, dude?
I thought I was working class, but I guess I'm just a parasite. I don't know.
All right. Dude, if we can distinguish ourselves from the rad libs, and then distinguish ourselves from these crazy people like the right wingers, which I don't think will be too hard. Like, it'll be easy for working class people to choose us.
Exactly. I was just talking about this with a guy I know about how Marxists have to delineate themselves from leftists, because we fundamentally are at odds 99% of the time when it comes to the real core stuff. And the leftists continuously are just like I'm talking about leftists like DSA, all these types. Like, they're continuously just alienating us by proxy from the working class. I mean, working class see crazy shit like what's been going on with Oliver Anthony, and they're like, I want nothing to fucking do with that. And these people are calling me fascist for liking a song. This is crazy. And they think that we're lumped in with that, you know? And it just immediately turns them off from ever talking to people.
Right. It's like people say the Democrats and Republicans, or the left and right, aren't the same, and they're not the same. They're two sides of the same ruling class coin. They work together. So these right-wing grifters like Matt Walsh and Ben Shapiro or whoever, like the communists, are a bunch of crazy leftists who, you know, think all the working people are fascists, and they just want to parasite off the working class to push their own political agenda. And then, you know, you have a bunch of leftists who actually act like that, and some of them even calling themselves communists or Marxists, when that has nothing to do with communism or Marxism.
Exactly. It just obfuscates. It obfuscates the whole thing.
Right. And that's why these radical recuperators are so important for the maintenance of the ruling class. These vouches of the world who call themselves socialists and then draw people into an ideology that's nothing but liberalism.
You know, and for legal purposes, allegedly is pedophilic. You know, like right. I can think of no bigger way to just immediately alienate every working class person ever. To be associated with fucking Vosh.
Leftists are doing a counterculture to meet the working class, and that's what the Congress for Cultural Freedom was, and why the CIA spent so much money doing that. Right? They didn't want a left focused on class struggle. They didn't want a left that sees class struggle as the motor of history, and as the wage laborers, as the main exploited class under capitalism, whose struggle we need to advance. They wanted a left that focuses on social issues and is just countercultural and anti-establishment and thinks all normal class working people are a basket of deplorables. Like, the CIA loves that shit. And then you have the right-wing pundits who say that's all the left is. And then you have the leftists who that's what they actually are. But now we're finally, I feel like, breaking through that and giving people, a real option, a real communist, Marxist, socialist, pro-labor option.
If only there was some guy who is a co-host on a show who wrote exactly about that. I don't know, something about purity fetishism or something.
Yeah, I there was this really ugly ass guy who teaches philosophy, who wrote a book about the purity fetish and the crisis of Western Marxism that everyone should get now.
Yeah, I think I shielded my eyes from looking at him, but I think I read the book, and in it, I think he said something along the lines of like that these pseudo-Marxists, these people who aren't Marxists in essence, but in what they try to show people that they can claim to be, that these pseudo-Marxists, like, their entire identity is tied to being counterculture. And that if Marxism was to truly take hold in the working class, it would destroy their identity. And that's why fundamentally they seek to obfuscate.
Absolutely. And I mean, people accidentally say it explicitly. Like, I was telling Carlos, there was this socialist influencer a while back who was making the argument that we shouldn't be recruiting workers to the left, period. And I was like, wait, what? I was just mind blown because, like, I figured that was a possibility, that anyone thought that. I thought everybody was on the same page. We want to win workers to communism. And they were saying no, because these people haven't been vetted properly, and we don't just want to let them into our social groups, without vetting them. And, it's not the job of white people like Midwestern Marx to bring these unvetted people into our groups. So, but for them, it's literally, and a lot of these people are very antisocial in real life. It's an online social group for them, an online countercultural social group that they want to protect from outsiders, and they want to protect from the workers, these deplorables. So, we got to break away from that, and we got to break away from these gatekeepers, these people who will gatekeep the left from the working class or gatekeep communism. We have got to break out of that and ignore these people. And that's why I encourage everyone to read The Purity Fetish and the Crisis of Western Marxism, which you can also get by becoming a $10 patron to Midwestern Marx.
Yeah, and I don't know, it kind of seems like they're saying the quiet part out loud, that they really just hate working class people and they just want to be edgy for their parents or some shit. That's not why I'm here. My parents actually watched the stream recently. They were
they like it?
Yeah, they liked it. They
Nice.
they know, well, they're not very political, but they like the pro-union stuff. They like
Awesome.
that's what I'm focusing my energy on there. So
sure.
Yeah.
I got one more question before we call it a day. We've been going for about an hour here, which is great. Thank you for coming on. But it is a little off topic, but you told me a story once about your time in the Dominican Republic when the Marxists there told you what they mocked the American left for and what they wish the American left would do. So can you tell that story? Because I've told it a million times, but it's better to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah. So, I mean, back when I was more involved with organizing, I was in a political party, and they were part of an international group. And so I went over and I was an ambassador to this very well-established Dominican Communist Party. It was explicitly a Marxist-Leninist organization. And they take me around, and we're talking. We met with like a bunch of trade unionists that they were supporting and stuff like that. And it was a great time. And at the end of it, we were wrapping up, and I'm like, what's like the one thing that like I could take back to people in the U.S., like communists in the U.S., about what you think they should be doing differently. And he said, I'm so tired of seeing like the Communist Party every other week. You guys, the reason you guys are doing this is because none of you guys like actually educate yourself and form a political cadre. You guys just make a party and then go out and do stuff and go out and talk to the masses and shit. And you guys are never on the same page. You guys are never like politically organized and actually like educated to like cadre level of like an actual pre-party formation. You guys just want to run around, and it's like lifestyleism is like what their main critique was. Like they don't see any actual substance there. They don't see any actual educated cadre. They don't see any political theory being advanced like what Carlos is doing. Like they don't see that, because what they see is the fucking DSA or the PSL. I mean, not to shit on these organizations, but like there is no serious concentration of a political cadre in these organizations. There is no serious organizing internally, and so they go out and they fall on their face, and then a new one starts the next week, and they go directly to the workers and try and just have these conversations about shit. And usually what even the Dominicans thought, it was all browbeating. Like it was never going and reaching the working class where they are. It's never going in and organizing based on their demands and trying to elevate their positions. None of that. It's all, let's go out and act like Jehovah's Witnesses, you know, for Karl Marx, who we haven't read. Like
The Trotskyite pamphlets.
Yeah.
If we hand out enough pamphlets, the revolution will come.
Yeah. If I sell one more paper, Daddy Trotsky will rise from the grave, you know? But I don't know. I mean, he said, you guys got to get serious about actually forming a political cadre. Actually, he said for them, what they did when they started out was, I think it was like 15 of them. They got together. This was in the 60s, and they read just a shit ton of theory, and they had a bunch of polemics, and they ironed out like a proper political platform. And then they started actually going out and recruiting people in and educating them based on that. They solidified their positions, and then they approached people to form a party. And it was pretty awesome, like how he was talking about it. But yeah, I mean, we haven't had that here yet. I mean, we did the CPUSA back when it was, you know, good morning revolution.
Read the CPUSA manual from 1935 just to see what the CPUSA was like back then. Like their focus was on connecting to the workers, connecting with labor, finding out what their demands are, and then advocating for their demands politically, you know, and that's when they were the most effective. Like that's what a communist party is supposed to do.
Like the 33 Congress, the special Congress in 1933 of the CPUSA was, I mean, if you could read the minutes from that, the stuff they were talking about, I bet it would just blow your mind.
Is that the one where they had Abe Lincoln?
Yeah, they had the big Abe Lincoln thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's the one that Carlos was talking about with Chris Townsend. Couple months, it was a long time ago, I think. Maybe, I don't know.
Right.
Maybe it was a month ago, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there was there was real, understanding there. The cadre had been developed, and it was out and approaching the masses, and they were doing real work. And then,
but
some bad moves in it, huh?
But they had the statue of a settler, Abe Lincoln. So
right, yeah. I mean, they failed. They didn't reach Sakai, guys. I mean, they needed to realize there is no such thing as a white proletariat in the U.S. I mean,
I'm sorry, I can't help myself. You were talking, you were explaining all the good things that the party is doing. You're so right, though. I mean, it was a party of the working class. There were some estimates say as many as 1 million card-carrying communists at the time, and then. Everyone wants to give FDR all this credit. Oh, FDR was the best president or the most socialistic president. He was making concessions to the organized working class. The late 1940s, there were more wildcat strikes than any other time in American history because they didn't want to lose the gains for workers that they had made during the war and after the Depression. And all the things that FDR enacted were so that the American workers didn't revolt and move towards socialism.
Yeah. Another thing was, I mean, sorry to cut you off, but like another thing that FDR was doing, everybody talks about how he was a great pro-union president. All of that was forced basically at gunpoint. From the rise of the CIO, because they were such a radical union. It was his new outlook on unionization. And they were all pretty much the founders, most of them were communists from the CPUSA and shit. And they were forwarding that goalpost, and they were going and they were enacting real class struggle. Look up the little steel strikes from the 30s. It's insane. They had these things called like mobile pickets. Basically, they would all pile into these trucks. They would get all the Union Joes in the back of the trucks, and they would go and form another picket up on the other street, and they would just keep running around Pittsburgh and shit, like flying pickets is what they called it. And they would go and set up a picket here, and then set up a picket over there, and the cops could never get them because they were just zooming around in trucks and like basically terrorizing the city. You know, it was insane.
That's
And
insane.
yeah, and they won huge. I mean, they really brought the class, like the trade union struggle, to its like apex back then. And FDR was shitting his pants. Like he had to give up this stuff, and most of the stuff that he enacted was just like people are like, oh, this is such, you know, progressive. Like most of the policy he enacted was like watered down versions of like what the communists were demanding. I mean, it was all concession based. None of it was like, I'm FDR and I really want to help America. He didn't give a fuck.
Right. The other two things I wanted to mention were that you had Howie Long or Huey Long, Louisiana politician, demanding socialism, saying we should go all the way, we should abolish capitalism, and so you
considered like one of the first populists, you know,
right,
like in American politics.
So you had people in the U.S. government calling for socialism, again forcing FDR's hand, and you had the Soviet Union. Like they're making such incredible gains in standard of living for their people and for their working class. The U.S. couldn't allow themselves to fall behind, you know, and that's where you have the creation of the so-called middle class, or this upward social mobility for at least white workers, is because it was forced by the organized working class, by the communists, by the unions, and internationally by the Soviet Union, and by
especially in the 30s
politicians.
Yeah,
right.
Especially in the 30s, because the entire of the Western world was in a crisis because of the Great Depression. The Soviet Union was not affected by the Great Depression. They were soaring to new heights. They were breaking. They surpassed the United States in like production quantities and stuff like that during the Great Depression. It was insane.
Right.
So when you see this other new social economic model and like your society is crumbling all around you, of course people are going to flock to that.
Exactly. Well, this was a great stream, Kyle. Thank you for coming on. Molly McGuire says, when will Midwestern Marx bring this dapper man officially into the Institute? Whatever he wants. I consider Kyle a part of the Institute at this point. We plan on doing these labor and organizing segments pretty regularly. And Kyle might start his own YouTube too. We're still working out the details of that. But yeah, you'll be seeing more of him. So thanks, Kyle. Anything you got to say before we call her a day?
Yeah, I love being here. I love talking. You know, the audience is always great. You know, I'm a member of the audience sometimes, so you know, I really enjoy it. And I always love talking about these labor politics because it's something I am directly involved with, and I hope you guys can be too.
Hell yeah. Well, thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to our moderators, Ware Pilgrim, Cobra, Jacob. We'll see you on the next stream.